The machines beeped steadily in the private hospital room at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. Thomas Tommy Wilson Jr., just 6 months old, lay in a special crib surrounded by more medical equipment than most hospitals owned. His tiny body seemed lost among the tubes, wires, and monitoring devices. His skin had taken on a sickly gray tone that contrasted sharply with the crisp white sheets. James Wilson, California's youngest tech billionaire at 34, stood motionless by the window. His normally commanding presence had diminished over the weeks of his son's mysterious illness. His wife, Elizabeth, sat beside the crib, her manicured fingers gently stroking Tommy's arm, the only part of him not connected to some machine. "The team will be here in 10 minutes, she said, her voice hollow from exhaustion. James nodded without turning. His company, NextGen Solutions, had revolutionized artificial intelligence in healthcare, but all his money and connections couldn't diagnose what was wrong with his son. 15 of the world's best doctors had examined Tommy. Specialists flown in from Johns Hopkins, Mayo Clinic, Cleveland Clinic. The list read like a who's who of medical excellence. Yet Tommy continued to decline, his little body growing weaker each day despite the army of physicians and cutting-edge treatments. Outside the hospital, life in Beverly Hills continued its glittering pace. The contrast couldn't be more stark. Inside these walls, the Wilsons' world was crumbling despite their wealth. At the other end of Los Angeles, in a small apartment in Compton, 12-year-old Stan Davis finished his morning chores. Unlike his classmates who slept in on Saturdays, Stan rose early to help his grandmother, who had raised him since his mother's death 3 years ago. "You don't need to clean the whole place, Stan," his grandmother called from the kitchen where she prepared a modest breakfast. "You should be outside playing." "Almost done, Grandma," Stan replied, wiping down the coffee table. Stan's grandmother, Beatrice Davis, worked as a custodial staff member at Cedars-Sinai. At 62, she still worked night shifts to support them both. Stan often helped her when the regular day cleaner called in sick, which happened frequently. The hospital administrators looked the other way, appreciating Beatrice's reliability and Stan's quiet efficiency. "Mrs. Wilson called," Beatrice said as Stan joined her for breakfast. "They need extra help today. Big meeting with doctors about their baby." Stan nodded, knowing the story. Everyone at the hospital talked about the billionaire's baby and the parade of famous doctors who couldn't figure out what was wrong. "Can I come?" Stan asked. He didn't mind helping, and the hospital fascinated him. He devoured medical books from the library, dreaming of becoming a doctor someday. "I suppose," Beatrice sighed. "But stay out of the way. Those fancy doctors will be there, and Mr. Wilson has been on edge." By mid-afternoon, Stan pushed his cleaning cart quietly down the pristine hallway of the hospital's VIP wing. He could hear raised voices from the conference room where doctors discussed Tommy's case. Through the glass walls, he saw James Wilson pacing while men and women in white coats argued over charts and test results. Stan continued his work, emptying trash cans and wiping surfaces with careful attention. He had learned to become nearly invisible in these settings. Rich people rarely noticed the cleaning staff, especially a black kid from Compton. "Nothing," James Wilson's voice boomed as he exited the conference room. 15 so-called experts, and not one of you can tell me what's killing my son." The doctors filed out, their faces grim. Stan pressed himself against the wall, trying to stay unnoticed as they passed. Elizabeth Wilson emerged last, her eyes red from crying. She walked unsteadily toward her son's room, and Stan instinctively moved his cart to make way. "I'm sorry," she whispered, though Stan wasn't sure if she was talking to him or herself. Stan finished cleaning the conference room, listening to snippets of conversation from the doctors who lingered in the hallway. "The symptoms don't match any known condition. We've run every test imaginable. The infection markers keep rising, but we can't find the source." Stan's curiosity grew. From books and hours of watching medical shows, he had developed a passion for medical mysteries. As he emptied the trash bin, he glanced at the discarded papers, lab results, imaging reports, and notes covered in medical terminology. One image caught his attention, an X-ray of baby Tommy's arm. Stan stared at it longer than he should have, noticing something the others might have missed. That evening, Beatrice found Stan unusually quiet as they prepared dinner. "What's bothering you, child?" she asked, setting down plates of spaghetti. "That baby Tommy Wilson," Stan replied. "I saw his X-rays today." Beatrice frowned. "Stan, you know you shouldn't be looking at patient information." "I know, but Grandma, I saw something weird." Stan pushed his food around his plate. In his right arm, there was a tiny shadow. It didn't look right. "Those doctors have looked at everything 100 times, Beatrice said gently. "That's not our business." Stan nodded but couldn't shake the image from his mind. That night, he pulled out his library books on human anatomy and read until his eyes grew heavy. The next day, Beatrice had to cover another shift. Stan accompanied her again, quietly completing his tasks around the hospital. When they reached the Wilson baby's floor, Stan noticed increased activity. Doctors rushed in and out of Tommy's room, and the parents' faces had grown more desperate. "His fever's spiking," a nurse said as she hurried past. "We're losing him." Stan felt his heart race. Without thinking, he slipped away from his grandmother and moved closer to Tommy's room. Through the glass, he could see the tiny baby, now connected to even more machines. James Wilson stood with his head in his hands while Elizabeth sobbed in a chair. A doctor emerged, shaking his head. "We're trying everything. The antibiotics aren't working, and we still can't locate the source of infection." Stan thought about the strange shadow he'd seen on the X-ray. He hesitated, knowing he shouldn't interfere, but something pushed him forward. "Excuse me," he said quietly. The doctor looked down, surprised to see a young black boy in custodial clothes addressing him. "Not now, kid. We're in the middle of an emergency." Stan persisted. "But sir, I saw the X-ray yesterday. There's something in his arm." The doctor's expression hardened. "You shouldn't be looking at private medical records. Please go back to your work." Before Stan could respond, Beatrice appeared, her face apologetic. "I'm so sorry, doctor. Stan, come with me right now." "Wait," came a voice from inside the room. James Wilson stepped out, his eyes red-rimmed. "What did the boy say?" Stan swallowed hard as everyone turned to look at him. I saw the X-ray of Tommy's arm yesterday. There's a small dark spot here," he pointed to his own right arm, just below the elbow. "It's tiny, but it shouldn't be there." James looked at the doctor. "Have you checked this?" "Mr. Wilson, with all due respect, this is a child with no medical training. We've had the world's best radiologists review all imaging." Elizabeth appeared in the doorway. "What's happening?" "This boy says he saw something on Tommy's X-ray," James explained, his voice betraying a mix of desperation and doubt. Elizabeth's eyes fell on Stan. Unlike her husband and the doctors, she didn't dismiss him immediately. "What's your name?" "Stan Davis, ma'am. My grandma works here." Stan pointed to Beatrice, who looked mortified. "And what did you see, Stan?" Elizabeth asked gently. Stan described the small shadow again, explaining how it looked different from the surrounding tissue. Years of reading medical books had taught him more than anyone realized. "Dr. Richards, could we check?" Elizabeth asked. "We have nothing to lose." The doctor sighed but nodded. "I'll get a portable ultrasound." Minutes later, Tommy's room had become even more crowded. 3 doctors hovered over the baby's right arm with an ultrasound wand, while Stan stood nervously in the corner with his grandmother. "I don't see anything unusual," Dr. Richards said after several minutes. "Try higher resolution," another doctor suggested, "and check exactly where the boy indicated." James paced anxiously while Elizabeth watched the screen intently. Stan held his breath, suddenly afraid he had given them false hope. Then Dr. Richards froze. "Wait, there's something there. It's tiny, maybe 3 millimeters. "What is it?" James demanded, rushing to the screen. "I can't tell exactly," Dr. Richards replied, adjusting the machine, "but there's definitely a foreign body embedded in the tissue. How did we miss this?" "Can you remove it?" Elizabeth asked, a new urgency in her voice. "We'll need to prep for a minor procedure," Dr. Richards said, already reaching for his phone to call in a surgical team. James turned to Stan, who stood wide-eyed by the wall. How did you see this when 15 specialists missed it? Stan shrugged, uncomfortable with the attention. I just noticed it looked wrong. I've read a lot of anatomy books. The procedure room is being prepared, a nurse announced, entering the room. We can move him in 10 minutes. James made a sudden decision. I want the boy to watch. Mr. Wilson? Dr. Richards looked confused. Stan, I want him to observe the procedure, James clarified. He saw what none of you could see. I want him there. The doctors exchanged glances, clearly uncomfortable with the request. Beatrice stepped forward protectively. Sir, he's just a child. Elizabeth touched her arm gently. Please, your grandson might have just saved our baby's life. James is right. He's earned the right to see this through. After some discussion and signed waivers, it was arranged. Stan would observe from behind glass while the doctors performed the delicate procedure to remove whatever was embedded in Tommy's arm. The procedure room buzzed with tension. Tommy lay sedated on a small table, his tiny arm prepped and draped. Stan stood at the observation window with Beatrice and the Wilsons, his heart pounding with excitement and fear. Dr. Richards worked with microscopic precision, making a tiny incision where the ultrasound had identified the object. Nurses and assistants moved efficiently around him, passing instruments and monitoring Tommy's vitals. I see it, Dr. Richards announced after several tense minutes. With microforceps, he carefully extracted something and held it up to the light. What is that? James asked, squinting through the glass. The object was placed in a small dish and brought out for inspection. It was a splinter, not of wood but of metal, no larger than a grain of rice. It appears to be a fragment of surgical steel, Dr. Richards said, examining it under magnification. It must have broken off from an instrument during his birth. But Tommy was born via cesarean, Elizabeth said, confused. Sometimes tiny fragments can break off from surgical instruments, another doctor explained. It's extremely rare, but it happens. The fragment must have migrated to his arm and caused a slow developing infection that our tests couldn't properly identify. James looked stunned. Are you telling me my son has been dying because of a metal splinter that your tests couldn't find? The body formed a capsule around it, hiding it from conventional imaging, Dr. Richards explained defensively. It wouldn't show on standard tests, and its small size made it easy to miss even on X-rays unless you knew exactly what to look for. All eyes turned to Stan, who shifted uncomfortably under their gaze. How did you know? Dr. Richards asked, professional curiosity overcoming his earlier dismissal. Stan thought for a moment. In my anatomy book, there's a chapter on foreign objects in the body. It showed pictures of how they look on X-rays. The shadow in Tommy's arm looked just like the examples. A nurse rushed in with preliminary lab results. The metal fragment is coated with a rare type of bacteria resistant to standard antibiotics. We've identified it and can target it specifically now. For the first time in weeks, hope bloomed on Elizabeth's face. So Tommy will recover? With the object removed and proper antibiotics, he should make a full recovery, Dr. Richards confirmed. James Wilson stared at Stan with an expression of wonder and gratitude. The boy from Compton had seen what 15 world-renowned specialists had missed. In that moment, something shifted in James's understanding of the world. By evening, Tommy's condition had already improved. His fever dropped and his vital signs strengthened. The Wilsons remained by his crib, watching each positive change with tearful relief. Stan and his grandmother prepared to leave after their extended shift. As they gathered their things, a hospital administrator approached. Mr. Wilson would like to see you both before you go, she said formally. They were led to a private consultation room where James and Elizabeth waited. James stood when they entered, his imposing figure softened by exhaustion and gratitude. Stan, he began, his voice thick with emotion. I don't know how to thank you for what you did today. Stan looked down shyly. I'm glad Tommy's getting better. You have an extraordinary gift, Elizabeth said. A natural intuition that can't be taught in medical school. James cleared his throat. I understand from your grandmother that you're interested in medicine? Stan nodded. Yes, sir. I want to be a doctor someday. That's why I've set up a trust fund for your education, James announced. Full ride, best schools, all the way through medical school and beyond, if that's what you want. Beatrice gasped. Mr. Wilson, that's too much. It's not enough, James interrupted. Money can't repay what Stan did for us today, but it can ensure that his talent doesn't go to waste. Elizabeth stepped forward and took Stan's hands in hers. You saved our son's life. You saw what others couldn't see because you weren't constrained by their assumptions and routines. Sometimes it takes a different perspective to find the truth. Stan felt overwhelmed. Just yesterday, he had been an invisible kid cleaning hospital rooms. Today, his future had been transformed. There's more, James continued. I'm establishing a new initiative at Next Gen Solutions, a program to identify and support gifted students from underserved communities who show aptitude for medicine and science. Stan will be our first scholar, but not our last. Beatrice wiped tears from her eyes. God bless you both. Stan finally found his voice. Thank you, Mr. Wilson. I won't let you down. I know you won't, James replied with certainty. And please, call me James. 1 year later, Stan stood in the gleaming lobby of the newly established Wilson Center for Pediatric Innovation. A large photograph hung on the wall. Stan with the Wilson family, including a healthy, laughing Tommy on his first birthday. Stan now attended the city's best preparatory school, where his intelligence and dedication had quickly made him a standout student. On weekends, he volunteered at the center, working alongside researchers, developing new diagnostic tools inspired by his discovery. The metal splinter incident had made international news, highlighting both the limitations of modern medicine and the value of fresh perspectives. James Wilson had become an advocate for diversifying the medical field, arguing that innovation comes from bringing different experiences and viewpoints together. As for Tommy, he had grown into a robust toddler with no lasting effects from his ordeal. Elizabeth often brought him to visit Stan, determined that her son would always know the boy who had saved his life. Stan walked through the center's research department, where scientists worked on a new imaging system specifically designed to detect minute foreign bodies in human tissue. They called it the Davis scanner in his honor. There he is. James called as Stan entered the conference room where a meeting was about to begin. Our guest of honor. Around the table sat doctors, researchers, and healthcare executives, many of the same people who had dismissed Stan a year ago. Today, they listened attentively as he shared his insights on making medical technology more intuitive and accessible. As Stan spoke, he caught sight of his grandmother sitting proudly in the corner. Beatrice still worked at the hospital, but now as the supervisor of environmental services, with better hours and pay. Sometimes Stan still couldn't believe how much had changed because of one moment, one small shadow on an X-ray that only he had recognized as important. It reminded him that knowledge could come from anywhere, and that sometimes the most valuable perspective was the one usually overlooked. After the meeting, James pulled Stan aside. I have news. The Davis scanner passed its final trials. It's already saved 3 children who had similar undetectable foreign objects. Stan smiled. That's amazing. It's all because of you, James said, placing a hand on Stan's shoulder. You know, when Tommy got sick, I thought all my money and connections would save him. I never imagined that the answer would come from a 12-year-old boy from Compton who cleaned hospital rooms. I just saw something that looked wrong, Stan said modestly. And had the courage to speak up about it, James added. That's the real lesson here. Brilliance can be found anywhere if we're willing to listen. As they walked together toward the pediatric ward where Tommy waited with Elizabeth, Stan thought about the strange twist of fate that had brought them all together. One tiny splinter, invisible to the world's best technology and experts, had changed so many lives, none more than his own. You know what the doctors call you now? James asked with a smile. What's that? Stan replied. The Miracle Boy, James said, though I think the future of medicine is more accurate. Stan laughed, but the nickname didn't bother him. Miracles, he had learned, often came from the most unexpected places. just like a poor black boy from Compton who did the unthinkable and saw what no one else could see. In Tommy's room, Elizabeth watched as her son giggled at Stan's funny faces. The bond between them was special, inexplicable to outsiders, but perfectly clear to her. "Sometimes I wonder," she said softly to James, "what would have happened if Stan hadn't been here that day?" James didn't answer. He didn't need to. They both knew the answer, an answer too painful to voice. Instead, he watched as Stan lifted Tommy into his arms, the boy who had cleaned hospital floors, now mentoring the son of a billionaire. In that simple interaction, James saw the future, a better one where talent and compassion mattered more than privilege and pedigree. As for Stan, he had learned that saving a life could sometimes save your own in unexpected ways. His journey was just beginning, but he faced it with confidence, knowing that he had already done the impossible once. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he would meet them with the same quiet observation and courage that had changed everything on that fateful day when 15 doctors couldn't save a billionaire's baby, until a poor black boy did the unthinkable.